Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of The Tactical Businessman. Today's topic, see, I told you so. When I was working as a police officer, I was in a situation much like many of you have encountered before. And that's either someone that you worked for or worked with or worked for you that was just a complete asshole, or at least that's what it seemed like. Now, in this particular case, I had been removed from the gang unit, and it was because I was doing some things that weren't really safe. I was kind of the maverick, if you will, the cowboy, kind of going out there and putting myself and others in these unsafe situations. So they told me a couple of times, hey, knock it off. I didn't listen. Boom. I got sent back to patrol. And the sergeant that I was sent to work for was, in no shortage of words, an asshole. He had this reputation. And he had this reputation because he liked things done a particular way. And when I first sat down and met with him, like, we had already not started off on the right foot. And so he had this particular way that he wanted to do things, right? And he wanted to make sure that we contacted a certain number of people every single day. Well, my main focus when I was on the streets was not to contact a certain number of people and fill out these field interview cards. No, my focus every single day was to contact people in order to arrest them. In other words, I was looking for the criminals, not the grandma walking the street, not mom with 3 kids. I was looking for the criminals. And for some reason, it's just like we weren't seeing eye to eye. And so as our time together started, it was pretty rough. And everybody that I was on the squad with at the time also told me, hey, he's an asshole. And what happened? Well, I started looking for either words, phrases, actions, things that he would do or say that would fulfill this idea that I had been, or that I had in my head, either placed there by me or by someone else, but this idea that I had in my head that he was an asshole. Now, what kind of things? Well, in briefing, he would talk about these field interview cards, or he would talk about the number of people that we contacted, or he would go over the stats and say, you know, we were low on this, or this wasn't happening, or whatever. And then I would be like, yeah, see, he is an asshole. Or he'd pull me aside and be like, hey man, you did good on this, but this is low over here. And I'd be like, see, he's an asshole. And so I kept looking for these things that he would say or do that would show me that he was in fact who I thought he was. And it got to this point after a few months that I was really pissed off, like really pissed off at him. I didn't want to go to briefing anymore. I didn't want to have any interaction with him. I didn't want anything. And he ended up calling me into his office, and I'm in my mind, I'm preparing for war. I'm like, see, he's an asshole. Here we go again, and this, that, the other. And we sat down and we had this conversation. And during this conversation, he proceeded to explain to me his point of view. Now, I hadn't taken the time to even try and understand it. But we started this conversation off talking about his police career. And at first I was like, really? Like, I don't really care about your career. But the truth is that he had done a lot of the things that I had wanted to do. He had worked undercover. He had worked for a vice unit. He'd done all these different things that I wanted to do. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute. He's now sharing with me his past about what he's done and where he's gone, and maybe this is somebody that I should listen to. And so we continue the conversation, and he explains to me the reason why. The reason why these field interview cards are so important to him. The reason why all of these other things are important to him. And he explained to me the reason why. And then he asked like what I thought. And then I explained to him the reason why on my side of things, which was, hey, listen, I could really care less about this field interview card. I'm really more interested in arrests. And during this conversation, which actually lasted a couple of hours, we got real clear on what he wanted, what I wanted. And then we were able to come together and say, okay, how is it that we can scratch each other's back? How is it that I can help him with what he wants, which is having all these boxes filled and making sure that, there's a quote unquote well-rounded officer, or I should say well-rounded squad, of which I was, an officer, where I could also get what I want, which was the freedom to spend time going after, the drug dealers and the armed robbers and all of these other hardened criminals, which was what I wanted to do. And this crazy thing started happening. Like, I would go out every day and I would take literally 10 or 15 minutes and fill out these boxes of things that he wanted, right? And then I had the freedom the rest of my shift, as long as there weren't calls holding, to do what it was that I wanted to do, which was go after these other guys. And this crazy thing happened. Like, all of a sudden we started getting along well. All of a sudden he started writing me up for employee of the quarter, or, he'd talk about to other people about me and everything. And I was like, what has changed? Like, what has changed for him and what had changed for me? And really, it wasn't that much. But what had changed was we had taken the time to sit down and have a conversation about these expectations, right? So in this particular moment, for a few months, I was living under this, what I felt, glaring spotlight of, don't screw up because I'm gonna screw you, right? I'd come off this stage in my career where, because my personal life and everything else was falling apart, I was trying to make up for it at work, which really just put me in a position of being even more unsafe and putting other people in danger. So that wasn't working. So he was tasked with trying to make sure that I was playing within the parameters, and I didn't want that. And so we'd started off on this bad foot, and then I'd taken this information that these other officers had given me and created this idea, right? This self-fulfilling prophecy, it's called. Now, another word for this self-fulfilling prophecy is something called confirmation bias. Now, what is confirmation bias? Well, confirmation bias is nothing more than the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. In other words, you're trying to take whatever new stuff is coming your way and interpret it, favor it, or recall information, put it in a box that fits what your preconceived or pre-existing beliefs were. And so I was told he was an asshole. I was told he was hard to work with. And so I would take something little like these field interview cards and make it into this big deal to where he was such an asshole, when in actuality, all he was trying to do was make sure that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing so I wouldn't get in more trouble. This confirmation bias was literally ruining our relationship and ultimately could have ruined my career. But I didn't see it that way. I want to give you another example, and I know a lot of you can relate to this. As a married man, or woman if you're listening, you'll hear it from my side though, and you'll hear it from the woman's side. As a married man, how many times have you gone home from work expecting things to be a certain way, and when they weren't, what happens? You blow up. You'll blow up on your wife, you'll blow up on your kids, like you just blow up. How many times you come home from working the proverbial long day at work, and you come home and the dishes are dirty, and the laundry's not done, and the bed's not made, and you're just like frustrated. You're like, I work all day. I'm super, tired, and all I do is I want to come home to a clean house and a wife who loves me and this, that, and the other. And instead she's passed out on the couch or something like that. And what happens? And you get super pissed off, right? And so you start to tell yourself this story that your wife doesn't love you, or that your wife is worthless, or that your wife is lazy, right? You start telling yourself these stories. And then what happens? So then as the days and the weeks and the months go on, you go home wanting to do nothing more than prove this theory that you have to be true, this pre-existing belief. Like, I know my wife is lazy. Why? Because when I come home, the dishes are dirty, the laundry's all over the floor, the beds aren't made, and she's still in her PJs. Like, she's lazy. And you come home, and that's what you see, and then what? I knew it. See? This is exactly what I said. And then you start what? You start fighting, you start arguing because she's lazy and she's this and she. what happens is you start falling for your own predictions. Listen to this. You start falling for your own predictions. Like you're putting yourself in a position not to succeed, but to actually fail. Now, why is it that we do this? Well, we do this, why? Because we want to prove something to be true. We see life as this big science experiment. The problem is, instead of seeing it as a positive one, we see it as a negative one. Why things won't work. Why you can't accomplish something. Why this won't happen a certain way. Why somebody is the way they are. And you look at this negatively. The problem with looking at it as negatively is, well, guess what? It's going to happen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're literally taking all the evidence and skewing it to justify what it is that you're trying to find. Crazy, right? But this is what we do. Instead of just looking at the facts. So let's take, again, your personal life, for example. The facts are your wife has 3 kids, all of them under the age of 7, and she works. Like, when is she supposed to do these other things? First of all, where does it say that she's supposed to do these other things? But where does it say that she's supposed to do all these other things? Like, how does that work? When have you taken the time to actually have a conversation with her about all these things and then see where it is that you can actually assist, help her, and alleviate some of that pressure so that your wife has time to be a wife, has time to be a woman, has time to then give back to you some of the things that you want, i.e. sex, intimacy. Now, what is the shift that needs to happen here, right? If we are going to live in a world of confirmation bias, in other words, we're always going to find what we're looking for, how do we shift it? Well, we shift it with what it is that we're looking for. So if every day you're looking for something that proves the fact that your wife is kind, that your wife is loving, that your wife cares about you, that she wants to be intimate with you, then guess what you're going to find? You're going to find those things. You're going to start taking the actions that prove that to be true. Same thing in your business. A lot of you guys are stuck in this proverbial circle of I don't make enough money, or I'm stuck. I can't make more money. My boss is an asshole. Like, we can go all down all these paths when it comes to business, to the way that you make and keep money. But the facts are, you've been looking at things the wrong way. Your confirmation bias is skewed to the negative instead of to the positive. What if you started looking around for opportunities that you had to make more money? Like, I went through this with one of my clients in the last couple of weeks. He's a very successful man. He's owned his own company for 18 years. Basically got kicked out of his own company. I should say demoted. Demoted from CEO down to basically a traveling salesman. Now, he still owns a moderate percentage of the company, but that's basically what he is now. He got demoted. And so he'd gone through this self-fulfilling prophecy as to why he wasn't good enough to be in that position again. And we worked on it, and we worked on it, and we worked on it, right? Shifting the view, hey, if I'm going to fulfill a prophecy, why don't I make it a positive one instead of a negative one? And now he's at a point where he's going to sign a contract to pay him $400,000, I think, is a year, plus 3% in a company that's worth, I think, $4 or $5 million. Like, he created this on his own. Why? Because he started looking for things that would validate that he was a successful man, a powerful man, a man who other people wanted to work with, and he started to create that reality. Same thing in his personal life with his relationship. See, I've gone through these same things myself. And so the challenge that I have for you is, instead of looking at things through this negative, like, confirmation bias, why don't we shift them to the positive? If you're going to fall for your own predictions, why not fall for the positive ones instead of the negative ones? So the challenge for you today is pick an area, either your business or your marriage or your body or whatever it is. Pick an area and look at what your biggest negative confirmation bias is. The negative thing that you're looking for. And then switch it. And then for a week, spend time only looking for the positive ones. Again, if it's your wife and right now you're struggling with your wife, she doesn't want to have sex with you because you're an asshole. Okay, cool. Like, what positive things could you find to say, my wife wants to have sex with me? And how could you create that to become your reality? Watch what happens when you start taking those actions to create the positive confirmation bias instead of the negative one. How much cooler would it be to say, I told you so, that you're having sex versus see, I told you so, that you're not. Just saying. I've experienced both. I like the positive one. All right, that's all I got for you today. As always, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.